Silent Confessions, a tale of longing, betrayal, and choices. Welcome back to Silent Confessions, the channel where the deepest desires and forbidden passions find a voice. Today's story takes us into the life of Emily, a devoted wife and mother whose steady world is shaken when temptation crosses her path. This is a tale of longing, betrayal, and choices that could shatter everything. Get comfortable, because this story will keep you captivated until the very last word. I've always considered myself a good wife and a loving mother. My marriage to Mark wasn't perfect, but it was stable, the kind of stability that felt like a warm blanket on a cold night. The routine of our lives had become predictable. Breakfast at 7, work till 5, dinner in silence, and then to bed. It was a quiet existence, one I convinced myself was just part of growing older together. Love, I told myself, was no longer about passion. It was about comfort, about commitment, but sometimes comfort becomes a cage. Our son, Jake, was 21, and our house had become his and his friends' favorite hangout. Most weekends, our living room transformed into a cacophony of laughter, clinking beer bottles, and music that rattled the walls. While the chaos could be overwhelming, it was reassuring to see Jake so happy, surrounded by people who clearly adored him. Among his friends was Tyler. He wasn't like the rest of them. While they were rowdy and carefree, Tyler had an air of quiet confidence that set him apart. He was tall, with sandy blonde hair that always seemed perfectly tousled, and eyes so piercing they seemed to see straight through me. He moved with an effortless grace, the kind that drew attention without trying. I'd catch myself watching him sometimes, scolding myself for even noticing. It was a humid Saturday afternoon when things began to change. Jake and his friends were out by the pool, their laughter echoing through the open sliding doors. I was in the kitchen, arranging snacks on a tray, when Tyler walked in. He was soaking wet, his hair damp and glistening, water dripping down his chest. He wasn't wearing a shirt. His presence filled the room in an instant, and I felt my cheeks flush. "Need a hand, Mrs. Miller?" he asked, his voice smooth and casual. I looked up briefly, my hands trembling slightly as I rearranged the sandwiches. "No, thank you, Tyler. You should go back outside and enjoy yourself." My voice was steady, but my heart was racing. He didn't leave. Instead, he leaned against the counter, crossing his arms in a way that only emphasized the lean muscles of his torso. "You're always taking care of everyone," he said softly, his eyes never leaving mine. "But who's taking care of you?" The question hung in the air like a secret waiting to be uncovered. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. His gaze was steady, unwavering, and it felt as though he was looking at a part of me I hadn't shown anyone in years. "It's what moms do," I replied with a forced laugh, turning back to the tray. But my hands shook as I placed it on the counter. Tyler didn't press further, but his eyes followed me as I left the room, and I felt their weight long after I was out of sight. Over the next few weeks, I began noticing him more. The way his laugh filled the room, the way he'd casually brush against me as he walked by, the way his eyes seemed to linger just a second too long. It was a dangerous game, one I told myself I wasn't playing. But deep down, I knew better. There was something unspoken between us, something that neither of us dared to acknowledge. Yet, every glance felt like a spark. Every accidental touch, a quiet plea for more. His presence was magnetic, drawing me closer without a single word. When our eyes met, it felt like the world fell away, leaving only the unrelenting pull between us. My breath would catch in those moments, the air thick with possibilities we both refused to name. I told myself it was nothing, but the truth lingered in the way my pulse quickened every time he was near. One evening, everything changed. Jake and the rest of the group had gone out for the night, leaving the house unusually quiet. I was sitting in the living room, a glass of wine in hand, when Tyler appeared in the doorway. "Everyone else left," he said, stepping inside. I didn't feel like going out. There was a softness in his voice, a vulnerability I hadn't seen before. He lingered for a moment before moving closer, his presence filling the space around me. He sat down beside me, the warmth of his body brushing against mine. "I guess it's just us then," I said, trying to sound casual, though my voice betrayed the quickening of my pulse. Tyler's gaze dropped to my lips, lingering for just a heartbeat before meeting my eyes again. Looks like it is, he murmured, his voice lower now, edged with something that sent a shiver through me. Would you like some tea? I asked, trying to maintain a sense of normalcy. He nodded, and I busied myself in the kitchen, acutely aware of his presence behind me. When I brought the tea to the couch, he was already sitting, his long legs stretched out in front of him. We talked for hours. I don't even remember how it started, but before I knew it, I was spilling my deepest fears and frustrations, things I hadn't even admitted to myself. He listened intently, his eyes never leaving mine, and for the first time in years, I felt truly seen. At some point, his hand brushed against mine, tentative at first, then steady, his fingers intertwining with mine. The warmth of his touch sent a soft shiver through me. You don't have to carry this alone, he said, his voice low and comforting, his words unraveling something tightly wound inside me. The kiss was soft at first, gentle, as if testing the waters. Then it deepened, his hand cupping my cheek as his thumb brushed against my skin, igniting sparks that left me breathless. In that moment, nothing else existed. Just him, just us, and the unspoken feelings that had finally found their voice. When I finished, Tyler reached over and took my hand. You deserve to feel alive, he said softly. His touch was warm, his voice low, and filled with something I couldn't quite name. Before I could think, before I could stop myself, he leaned in and kissed me. The kiss started gentle, tentative, but quickly deepened, carrying the weight of everything we hadn't said aloud. His hand slid up to cup my cheek, his thumb brushing lightly against my skin, sending shivers down my spine. I leaned into him, the heat between us building as his fingers tangled in my hair, drawing me closer. The world around us seemed to fade, leaving only the warmth of his lips and the electric pull between us. His kiss wasn't just a promise, it was a confession, raw and undeniable, and for the first time I let myself get lost in him, in us, in the moment we'd been skirting for so long. It was gentle at first, hesitant, as though he was giving me a chance to pull away, but I didn't. I couldn't. The kiss deepened, and suddenly, all the years of monotony and loneliness melted away. His hands slid to my waist, pulling me closer, and I could feel the steady warmth of him grounding me, even as my heart raced. His lips moved with a purpose, soft yet insistent, leaving no doubt about the unspoken feelings that had finally broken free. My fingers found their way to his hair, threading through the softness, holding him to me as though afraid this moment might vanish. The air between us felt charged, crackling with an intensity that left me breathless. It wasn't just the kiss. It was everything it carried, the longing, the release, the promise of something more. In that moment, I wasn't just alive, I was utterly consumed by him, by us. The sound of the front door opening broke us apart. Jake's voice called out, and panic shot through me. Tyler stepped back, his expression unreadable, and I quickly composed myself, praying that my son wouldn't notice the storm raging inside me. But even as I tried to steady my breathing, the heat of Tyler's touch lingered on my skin, the taste of his kiss still fresh and intoxicating. His eyes met mine for a fleeting moment, dark and full of unspoken promises, sending a fresh wave of longing through me. I should go, he whispered, his voice low and rough, but the way his fingers briefly brushed mine as he turned to leave told me this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. As Jake's footsteps grew closer, I swallowed hard, my heart still racing, knowing that whatever had started between Tyler and me had already changed everything. Sometimes life takes us to the edge, forcing us to face the parts of ourselves we've buried for too long. Emily's story isn't over, and neither is the turmoil in her heart. What will she do next? Will she give in to temptation again, or will she find a way to escape it? As Tyler disappeared into the night, the weight of what had just happened settled over me. My heart raced, not just from the kiss, but from the realization that my carefully constructed walls were beginning to crumble. For so long, I had been existing, not living, numbing myself to avoid the ache of loneliness. But in those stolen moments with Tyler, something changed. I felt alive again, vulnerable yet exhilarated, terrified yet hopeful. Life is messy, unpredictable, and full of moments we can't take back. But sometimes it's those very moments that show us what we truly want and what we're willing to risk to feel alive again. What would you do in my shoes? Would you take the leap, or would you let fear hold you back? I'd love to hear your thoughts and silent confessions in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, share that, and subscribe to Silent Confessions for more stories of vulnerability, love, and the tangled emotions that make us human. Let's navigate life's complexities together, one confession at a time.